Good morning, Professor. Today we are going to talk about the free trade agreement between the United States and Colombia. Firstly, I would like to mention some general aspects about this free trade agreement. The United States and Colombia Free Trade Agreement was signed in November 22 of 2006, and is a free trade agreement that was established in order to eliminate barriers and tariffs in order to promote the commerce between and or among these two nations. Some key dates that we must understand in order to talk about this free trade agreement are: the negotiations started in May of 2004. The agreement was signed in November 22 of 2006. Colombia's Congress approved the signature in 2007. The U.S. Congress passed it in October 12 of 2011, and the agreement entered into force in May 16 of 2012. Now, there are some main rules and provisions that this free trade agreement promotes. The first one, and is the most important one, is the tariff elimination. So nearly 70% of the U.S. farm exports to Colombia will reduce its prices. Another of the key aspects that we must understand is the government procurement of the U.S. Suppliers receive non-discriminatory treatment in Colombian government procurement with fair and transparent building process. Now, there is another key aspect that we have to understand, and is the customs and trade facilitation. The free trade agreement allowed Colombia to enter into a global market, not only with the United States, also with other countries of the region and on other countries in the world. We can also mention another key aspects such as the labor and environmental standards. The agreement is consistent with the WTO principles, and the investments protection. Now, there is a second point that we must understand in order to talk about the free trade agreement between Colombia and the United States, and is the benefits that this trade agreement has done with Colombia. The first one, as it was mentioned previously, is the elimination of tariffs on key exports. We have to talk about some key products that Colombia is exporting to the United States, such as coal, coffee, etc. We can say that the export of these products has increased since the free trade agreement was established. Now, another benefit that this free trade agreement generated to Colombia is the facility to access to the American market. We can say and be consistent that competitors in Colombia and in the United States have now more facilities to access to each market, and also to get in the market's economy. Also, there are some secondary benefits from Colombia, such as the trade diversification or growth, and the stability or security, which generates transparency when exporting products from Colombia to the United States and importing goods and services from the United States to Colombia. Talking about goods and services, this is also another important aspect that the free trade has generated as well.
Okay, now we are going to talk about benefits of free trade agreements for the other country or countries. When a country signs a free trade agreement with Colombia, it also gains a strategic, economic, and commercial advantage. We have a practical example with U.S. and Colombia. The U.S. gains preferential access to sell machinery, cars, software, and pharmaceutical products. U.S. companies invest in oil, mining, and infrastructure in Colombia. They secure a reliable trade partner in a strategic region. Free trade agreements do not only benefit Colombia, both sides win. For the partner country, these treaties offer. For example, we have increased exports because both countries sell more products and services to Colombia. Investment and business because with both countries shares opportunities to set up companies or factories. Other is the access to raw materials because Colombia has a stable and reliable supplier. And we have expansion of influence in the way of political and economic strengthening in the region. And the last one is the cost reduction because both countries or Colombia have fewer taxes and trade barriers. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the challenges facing the free trade agreement. It's important to clarify that it represents challenges for both parties, but I'm focused with the Colombia challenges, like the unequal distribution of benefits, international competition that could affect domestic sectors, and the lack of the infrastructure to take full advantage of the agreement. It also highlights the need for Colombia to adapt to international standards, especially in areas such as intellectual property and financial services. By the way, the free trade agreements are not inherently good or bad. Their outcomes depends on how they are implemented and whether they are supported by the right public policies, like support for industrial and agricultural development, the investment in innovation and education, and the strong labor and environmental regulations. That's the la cagué.
Okay, now let's talk about the criticism this FTA has received. And it is worth mentioning that the main exponent of this criticism has been from the Colombian side, is Gustavo Petro. And yeah, let's talk about the main criticisms this has received. The first one is unfair competition and impact on Colombian agriculture. Gustavo Petro has repeatedly denounced the FTA's provisions that allow U.S. agricultural products, especially corn and milk, to enter Colombia without tariffs. He claims this has practically wiped out Colombia's corn farmers and threatens the livelihoods of local milk producers, creating unfair competition for Colombian agriculture. The second criticism you're going to talk about is failure to diversify exports and economic structures. This means that some critics, including the think tank Sede Trabajo, argue that the FTA failed to deliver on promises of export diversification and economic growth. Instead, Colombian exports to the U.S. have become more concentrated in primary commodities such as oil, coal, coffee, flowers, and gold, with little progress in promoting value-added or industrial exports. This has reinforced a primary resource export model, which many see as an obstacle to broader economic development and industrialization. The third criticism you're going to mention is investor-state dispute settlement concerns. And what this is about is that the investment chapter 10 of this FTA, has been another major point of contention, since critics argue that provisions allowing foreign investors to sue the Colombian state in international arbitration undermine national sovereignty and expose Colombia to costly legal disputes. The recent interpretative note clarifies some aspects of these provisions, but does not eliminate the risk of future arbitration cases. We're going to talk about this later on when we talk about the future of this FTA. As for the criticism this has received from the U.S.A. side, we have mainly fears and concerns. For example, concerns that the U.S. has of the economic impact this FTA may have on its workers, political process and delays, and fears about implementation and enforcement of labor and environmental standards to fulfill this FTA. As for the future of this FTA, it is a little bit uncertain since the arrival of Donald Trump to power, that is the presidency of the US for the second time in January 20th of this present year. But just before that, the 15th of January of this year, the interpretative note that I mentioned we were going to talk about was signed, and it was agreed that the Colombian state sovereignty was not gonna be threatened by foreign investors. That is, the Colombian disputes in Colombian territory can be solved under Colombian laws. This means that there might be a good future, but since Donald Trump has been imposing tariffs on many countries, including Colombia, it is a little bit uncertain, as I mentioned, what is going to happen about this FTA. Also, it is worth mentioning or worth thinking that since Colombia is gonna have a new president in just 1 year, 2026, this FTA may be affected positively or negatively depending on what the beliefs and thoughts of this new president is going to be, if this is more aligned with what Donald Trump thinks or in disagreement of many current of thoughts of this figure. So this is it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.